Thank you for tuning into the Texas Scratch King Game Dog channel. Part 2 of the historical interview with Floyd Boudreaux. Interview continues. With Floyd saying so. What happens now is that all these fast lane dogs with hard mouths are doing away with all of these old game dogs. Going right through them. But I still prefer gameness more than anything else. Anybody can breed dogs that will bite hard and or rough, but it is more difficult to breed dogs that will stay. With a game dog, you have a shot at the money and there is no monopoly. There is nobody that has cornered the market on these dogs. Dogs are just like humans. And I'll explain that to you. You can have two brothers. One a gentleman and the other one that's not even worth the powder on it would take to blow him up. And still they both come from the same father and mother. So, with these dogs, it is the same. You are going to have dogs. Each with his own character. And what we try to do is to get the good genes together. We would all like our sons to be president. But the chances are so few. If a dog doesn't perform at an early age, there is nothing you can do about it. My dogs are basically late starters, and as a rule of thumb, your late starters make a better dog. I want a young dog to show a pretty strong interest in what we are doing before I start them out. This is how I schooled my dogs. They must be ready to understand what is going on and have a desire to do it. When they are willing, I start to school them a few times, and when I think he is ready, I put everything on him. I'm serious. I'd put a big dog on a little one, and most people will tell you I'd put 2 or 3 dogs in one if I wanted to test him. I had to see a dog to satisfy me. Not please somebody else. I have used dogs that I rolled only 8 or 9 minutes. But if they give me a reason to take a longer look, I certainly will. Who knows if a dog will make one more scratch enough. You pick him up, and to your satisfaction he goes like a bullet and stands the line the next shot. Who is smart enough to say he is gambling? One bit of advice to young men that start out in these dogs would have to be, learn to have patience. Let your puppies grow up before you make a decision on them. You can't expect a child to do a man's job. You have to give them a fair shot. If I was to use a dog for serious money, I would wait until he is 2 or 2.5 years old. At least. I would certainly not use him sooner than that. The oldest dog I used was 9 years old. But you can use them up to 6 years old easy. They can't win them all. But they can take so much more when they are 3 years old, to me. That's being at a peak. I will give an example. My daddy had a dog called Nan. He matched him into Gaboon Trahan, and he was using a dog named Country Boy, which was also named Peter. Country Boy was just a young dog. In 33 we beat him and he jumped the pit. I will never forget this because my dog had a broken tail. He let him get some age on him and then started to school him. When this dog was matured, hell, you couldn't stop him anymore. So Gaboon got his dog back again, and by this time Country Boy had won several fights. One of his wins was over a good winning son of Debo called Topper. He beat him in a real short time. Topper was owned by Bob O'Neill at that time. Eventually, Country Boy was matched into a dog called Bobtail, and that fight went something like 2 hours. Bobtail broke his jaw and Country Boy probably would have won. But Gaboon offered a draw because he knew that the man who owned Bobtail didn't have a lot of money. And he had a wife and some kids. He knew that if he would take the money, it would come from the farm. His reason to fight these dogs was to demonstrate that he had the better dog. And he had done that already. So he offered to call it a draw. The moral of this story is that we really gave Country Boy a second chance after he quit against Nan. Most other men would have shot him, but age really helped this dog. That's the hardest thing to explain to a young man who is coming into the game. I'm not making excuses for a dog that quits, and I'm not like some dogmen who are despite their ways good people, but will sell you a pup for $2,000 or $3,000 and tell you to wait 4 or 5 years on it. A lot of dogs are retired at that age. Good or bad? No. I don't make excuses. But in turn, I had some of the best that were late starters. When Leo Canard started to keep dogs in Mississippi, was he the first one to introduce bulldogs over there? Not really. George Sadler was fighting them before Leo in Mississippi. Both Leo and George put in some big shows. But Leo's were always a little bit better. He had a real nice place. Nice building, and he kept more bulldogs than anybody else in those days. He had about 250 dogs. Leo had a friend named Frank James, and this Frank was an interesting person. He was namely the brother of the notorious Jesse James. Both Frank and Jesse were well-known outlaws. Jesse was killed. Frank got amnesty and later moved to Meridian, Mississippi and worked in a restaurant. Leo told me that Frank Fitzwater was a son of that Jesse James. Fitzwater was a good dogman. His wife Sarah was sick. She had cancer, and Leo took her to the best doctors in the country. They went to New York, and he did anything for her. He loved her dearly. He told me he spent more than $125,000 on her without much result. When she died, it broke him. Then later on, the state bought some of his properties, but they never paid him and he died broke. We sent him some money every month. I was working and he was not. The last time I saw the man, he walked us to the car and shook my hand. He didn't say much. But he was crying, and so was I. He died of a heart attack. I believe he was 67 years old when he died in 1976. He left me some dogs. Doghouses. Some chains. Etc. Leo loved to talk about dogs. From the time we got up till late at night. He was a bootlegger and always had all kinds of whiskeys. Champagne. Cigarettes of all brands, and if you were his guest, it was yours. Many times we were there and talked dogs with Jim Taylor and many others. Leo lived his life to the fullest. He had 3 different cars. 2 Cadillacs and a truck. He would deliver the whiskey with the cars. Sometimes I would go with him and often we would come home. Change cars and go off again. He never had any trouble with the law until the National Guard came down on him. Leo was not a breeder as such. He bred some. But from all the good dogs he had, I can't remember one that produced something equally as good as themselves. I remember he had some put Colby dogs that were game until the 3rd generation. Then they started to quit in the pit. He still bred several of them and they were game again. Leo had full-time help and that makes a difference, of course. His setup was beautiful. All fenced in and a big gate that was closed around the 6-bedroom house. Guard dogs were all around running loose. Leo was a great dogman. I knew him when he had $65,000 in his pocket and later when he had less than $1 to spend. It didn't make a difference to me because he was my friend and that never changed. From all the dogmen that you knew in those days, who was the toughest? And who was the best dogman in your time? The man I admired the most was George Sadler. He too, like Leo, was from Mississippi. George taught me a great deal about conditioning. He never had many friends because he was a businessman. He had a restaurant and he never needed friends. He just went on with his business. But I thought I was his friend. One of the first things he told me was to take care of your dog and he'll do right for you. Don't come half drunk with some ladies and expect to do good. Stay with your dog, give him all the attention he needs. If you come to win. There is plenty of time later to party. Did Sadler bring his dogs in fine or dried out pretty good? Yes. He brought them in keen. Always sharp and prepared for the duration. Did he fight a basically hard-biting dog? A punisher? No. I remember him winning more on the distance than on the bad dogs. My rebel dog was a rough dog and George ran him half an hour just before he fought him because he was overweight. He fought him on a Tuesday night. Came in overweight and took him down the road around the river until he made weight. And still won the fight in short time. He pretty much picked his dogs. And he, like Leo, had some help to walk the dogs. He would send somebody out to walk his dog and tell them not to come back until late at night. I learned from him that hand walking a dog will help him to stand on his feet during a long hard contest. I'm sure you can do it many other ways. But that's how I learned it. George was a gambler. If he had seen your dog before and you were matched into him, you were automatically at a loss. He would buy a good dog and gamble hard. He had a good eye for a bulldog. His son-in-law Curly Hayes also helped George a lot and he was very competitive dogman himself. Did you know Joe Curvino and Earl Tudor? Oh yes. Joe was a good man and a friend of mine. He was a short, stocky man and chewed tobacco. He was a gentleman and really liked the dogs. He would come here mostly on Thursdays. A few days before the fights and he would stay here. Talking dogs. He was like me, he thought that if you had gameness in your dog you had a shot. No matter what. Joe was always dressed up in a 3-piece suit plus watch chain. There were others that had suits on. Like Bob Wallace, Mr. Marshall, Leo Canard, sometimes Cecil Collins and of course George Sadler. Howard Heinzel always wore cowboy boots and a Texas hat. Another gentleman was Bob Hemphill. The man who had all those red-nosed dogs. Hemphill lived here quite a while and worked at the fire station. That was 1927. He left from here and took 2 dogs with him. One was Hobo Joe. But I can't remember the other one. Earl Tudor was more a conditioner than a breeder. He had some very good dogs like Debo, Jeff, Spike, White Rock and a dog named Cracker. In his younger days, Earl fought a lot of dogs all the time. Always looking for something to match. Back in those days, he bought a lot of dogs from other people. But later when I knew him, he bred his own. When he was younger he had those Komasinski type dogs. Not the terrier type, but more like the old Donovan type. I really don't know where he got them. But they looked a lot like dogs that Cockney Charlie Lloyd had and later were owned by men like Komasinski and Donovan. I was lucky to get Blind Billy and Rascal. I put them together with good results. Gaboon Trahan's Rascal. Yes. You see Trahan never owned that dog. It should be Boudreaux, Rascal. Like he is registered. I still have his papers here but I don't care if the rest of the world thinks of him as Trahan's Rascal. Anyways. I owned that dog and I crossed him with Blind Billy. Now Rascal wouldn't start when he was a young dog. And as a matter of fact, he was stolen one time but because he wouldn't fight, they turned him loose. I saw him in 1957 when I got out of the service and he fought against a big black dog that has out of cannons black shine in those dogs. At that time we were all arrested. But in those days it was just a misdemeanor. There was nothing against bulldogs really. Rascal was owned by SP. And I traded one of Rascal's sons for him. A young dog called Rascal Jr. This pup only had one testicle. But SP took the pup and later sold him. The man that traded Rascal to me is still alive. Rascal produced that country boy dog, Marciano, and several other good females. As a matchdog, I think Rascal was probably a little overrated. He was a game dog. Red and white in color. He was also a bad ear dog just like country boy. Is your good stock mostly Corvino? Yes. What I did was, my Blind Billy dog was born in 1952 and I bought him in 1953. My uncle had 4 ace roosters and we traded them with Earl Tudor for Blind Billy. He was a son of Debo and he wouldn't fight until he was 2.5 years old. Was he blind? No. Not really. His eyes had always been a little weak. And in his last contest he was blind. Yes. I won a real good match with him in 26 or 28. Then the second time. I was very young then. They tried to fool me. It was pretty dark in the place where the pit was set up and it was my turn to scratch Billy. Earl Tudor jumped up out of joy when Billy was scratching towards the other dog. He was about halfway when he turned around to look at Earl and hit the pit wall. He never stopped looking for the other dog. But he was counted out and lost that fight. We didn't get the trophy that day, but Billy was the best dog in the show and from then on they called him Blind Billy. Like I said before, his sire was the Debo dog and I believe Howard Heinzel had something to do with that dog. Debo was stolen when he was a young dog and sold to a black man who owned a restaurant. Debo's real name was Runt and when he started at the age of 4 they picked him up again and matched him. What about your dog named Ox? Ox was a very smart dog. He was a superb ear dog and also very game. When I turned him loose he never missed that ear. A long time ago we matched him in Mexico. He was matched for $16,000. Which in those days was a lot of money. I was matched into the district attorney of Mexico City. He had a good little dog and he told me that his dog would break legs and said that it was going to happen to Ox too. The only comment I had to make was that if Ox would turn him loose he wasn't going to break anything. Ox was smart and I am convinced that he would have stayed out of trouble. The only thing Ox couldn't do was talk. That's how smart he was. But the show never came off because of a couple of punks from California who were involved in other activities and had been followed by the authorities. This was not just another convention, it was going to be one of the greatest get-togethers in a long time. There were 2 or 3 super dogs to be matched. The trophy alone for the winner cost $2,000 and was made by Larry McCaw from California. Plus the fact that nobody brings a dog that far when they are not satisfied with the dog at home. After that, we sold Ox because we needed money to buy a new place. He went to a man from Florida named Bob Johnson. 1 week after he took him, he called me and told me he put 3 dogs on Ox. He said he stopped the first dog in 20 minutes. The next one went a little over half an hour and the third one Ox fought like he just started. So they picked him up. He told me Ox was a very game dog. I told him that I assumed he was game but didn't realize he was that game. People don't seem to understand that even the very best will often quit if you stress them hard enough. It's just a matter of how much you put on them. There is no sense in killing them while testing them because there is something like a breaking point. Some dogs have that never been used because they quit at home might have been great dogs in the pit under the right circumstances. Lack of knowledge. That's what it is. Ox was a polished ear dog and he could keep himself out of trouble. But most other dogs couldn't stand this kind of abuse. These dogs are just flesh and bone like anything else. Most men don't even recognize an ace dog when they see one. A lot of fellows will take all the good out of a dog when he is still young. And then later condemn him for not being a good one. They try to condition a dog on a treadmill when they are half drunk and watching TV. Now that I'm back on the subject of schooling. I took the devil dog of Oklahoma and rolled him no more than 9 minutes and later I used him to whip chicken same. He used a dog that I saw fight for 3 hours. Sometimes when you see an all beaten up dog, people say that's a bad one. I say, no sir. That's a bad one that passed on him. That's the way it goes. Who was the best breeder in your days? Well, that's hard to say. Breeding dogs is a heartbreaking experience because when you have something good it will practically never reproduce the same. You can raise anything easier than bulldogs. Like chickens, horses, etc. There is so much you've got to have in an ace dog. You get them with talent and they are curs. You get them that are game but they can't fight. Hitler tried to breed humans. But he also didn't succeed. He had them built like he wanted. But they didn't have the brains. I have never had many dogs in my life. But I did have some good ones so I think that's not bad. I can sure understand that when a man has kept hundreds of dogs or more. He comes up with some good ones. It's like this. Know what you see. Know what the dog is and know an ace dog when you see one. Only time will teach you that. Only time. But also you have enough to select from. That's the key too. If you have a big selection you generally come up with better dogs. If you take a good female and breed her to a good male you have a chance of coming up with something good. It's that simple. Breed your best bulldogs to another top-notch bulldog and if they don't produce. You breed them to something else and then if that doesn't work, you better forget about it. I had a female one time. Her name was Tammy. She was by far the smartest dog I've ever owned. She was out of that black shine dog and she was the only dog I let into the house. She was real sharp, if she was fighting. For instance, I could call her off and let her sit down with me and send her back anytime I wanted. I bred her to both Rascal and Blind Billy the same time, with no more than 5 days or so in between. I did this because both males were old and I really didn't want to miss this breeding. So I first bred Billy and then Rascal about 5 days later. The pups were born about 61 days after I bred Billy. But some of the pups were spotted just like Rascal was. She had 13 pups and every pup in that litter was good. All of them were pit-worthy. Bob Wallace was here when I bred Rascal to Tammy, so I gave him a pup. He named the pup Socks and always told everybody he was out of Rascal. I didn't really care because both Billy and Rascal were mine and they both were out of the same female. But people are quick to criticize. The minute they saw a spotted pup they would say he was out of Rascal instead of Blind Billy. I never made a secret out of it and told everybody about it. Most people just wanted to say something. But I knew better. There are so many people making money with these dogs and all they do is deal in pedigrees. I never cared too much about that. I bred my dogs for myself and all they had to do was satisfy me and nobody else. Money is no object when you are trying to breed and raise good bulldogs. I would be rich if I had all the money other people have made by peddling these dogs. But it is against my morals to breed something just for the money if I don't believe in it. Most people that do don't even know what they are talking about. What would you say to a young man just starting out in these dogs? Stop. Don't do it. I would try my best to discourage him. This is a bad disease. When it gets in your blood it stays. The reason why I admire them so much is for what they are capable of doing. They are all American dogs. I'll probably always have a few. And even when I go down to 6 or 7, I will still breed a few now and then. But if a man was going to keep bulldogs, what would you tell him? I don't know. I would say be honest and give it your best shot. And give your puppies a chance to prove themselves. If a pup is 12 or 14 months old, he will grab anything. Just like a young person. When they are closer to 2 years old, they will show more strength and be a better dog. These dogs cost a lot of money. They take a lot of time. But it makes a man proud to own a good one. I had 1 or 2 good ones but didn't always have the money to go into top competition. But once or twice we had somebody to split the money and we gave it a shot. It was worth it. So many people talk about doing great things in their lives but they never do it. They wouldn't know how. When the going gets tough and the stakes are high, it takes more than just money. It takes a man with guts, a strong personality and lots of ambition. Plus a good bulldog to compete in the fast lane. Thank you for tuning into the Texas Scratch King channel. Subscribe, like and share this video. Until the next time. Never submit to life, keep scratching every time.